Welcome to this week's episode of the Evolve to Succeed podcast. My guest this week is Louise Southam from Beyond Belief. Louise is a leadership and business coach, as well as a personal coach and mentor. We're going to hear about Louise's own personal journey, as well as some insights from her around leadership and what she thinks may be happening in the world right now. So without any further ado, let's get on with the show. Welcome, Louise, to the Evolve to Succeed podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Really interested in our discussion today, our discussion that will tell a bit about your personal story and your personal journey, but also some of your thoughts around leadership, coaching and mentoring and all of those things that you do within Beyond Belief. So we should really start with giving our listeners a bit of an insight to you and how your journey kind of transpired to be the one that did found Beyond Belief a number of years ago, and what those experiences were, some of those highs, some of those lows that led you to where you are today, Louise.
Okay, thank you. So where do I start?
Yeah, it's always the big question.
I know, and I think that if I think about the driving point, what was it that was that shift? So I initially had come from a recruitment background, which was sales fundamentally. Very good at what I did. And I went to see Tony Robbins. It must have been 2006.
Okay.
And he is Marmite.
Yeah, he has got one of those, love him or loathe him.
I mean, I can remember walking in and these yellow T-shirted people on chairs, and it was about 10,000 people all with their hands up in the air. I was thinking, what is this? Is this a cult?
Yeah.
He said something though that it was the UPW, Unleash the Power Within.
Okay.
And he said, you can't choose your family, but you can choose the people you surround yourself by. Now, by this time, I'd been in recruitment for 9 years, something like that, probably 7 at the company that I did IT recruitment. And I just remember thinking, I'm in the wrong place.
Right.
This light bulb moment.
It was that fundamental.
It was that fundamental that I thought, I don't like the values of the company. I don't like the morals of the managers. I was like, I do not aspire to be them.
Right.
And that's really quite challenging, because then you think, well, this is what I know. This is my identity as well. What do I do with this?
This is how I earn, and this is how I support myself, and all of those kind of things.
So I went home and I did a free online life coaching course at Newcastle College. I'm sure it was excellent. But it just was that first step. And I did actually resign, and I stayed in recruitment, but I went in-house.
Okay.
And I went and worked for BT. So I worked for a big global organisation, and I managed a lot of their projects there, and all recruitment projects. So I stayed within recruitment, but shifted the environment. Yet I still had this kind of calling of, I really want to do what he's doing, as in Tony Robbins, to be out there making a difference. I now know that he used a lot of NLP tools and a lot of the mindset piece. But at the time, I just met my then husband.
Okay.
And so I did go off and pay for these 2 amazing courses, and I did nothing for 7 years. So because I had got married, I had Eden.
Okay.
I had to go back to work and then rebuild a career, which I did locally as a recruitment manager. So
was there this burning desire during that 7 years? Or were you able to go, right, I'm a mum, newly married, I'm a mum, I can compartmentalize that? Or was it just this kind of burning desire?
So initially, it was, I'm a mum, I'd already had my eldest son, and I was divorced, and I brought him up on my own. So I'd been, I'd already had this career being a single parent and running that. So being a mum, I was nearly 40 when I had Eden.
Okay.
I was in a different mindset, and so I loved it until he started to go to nursery, and then there was this mum there, and she's passed now, which is sad, but she was doing the work that I guess I do now. And when somebody is in front of you and it's like, hello, I'm just going to remind you, you're not living your dream.
Right.
And it was every time I saw her, I used to say, Jo, I should be doing what you're doing. And she had a Scottish accent, and I'm not going to do that. She's like, yes, you should. And it was probably 2 years after that still. So Eden would have been about 3 now. And I had some ill health, nothing major. I now know that anything to do with gut typically is stress. And I had some gut challenges, and I was off work, which is not like me at all. And it was at that point I just couldn't not listen to myself anymore. I knew, and it was that it's like I get this feeling, it's like a calling, it's a knowing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I have to do this. So I called up on the place where I paid my money 7 years before, and I registered for my first weekend away, and I did the personal coaching, and I did the corporate and executive coaching consecutively, which apparently nobody does. You do one, but that's not how I operate. I'm like, let's just do it. We're doing it. Let's do it properly. So that's where I started, and I was working locally. I was running all the recruitment for a big company in Bournemouth. Well, they were national, and I ran the team in Bournemouth. I also ran their Belfast team. I ran the home. I had, my eldest son was, he was still at home. He was 18 by then.
Okay.
I had Eden at school, nursery, and I was, doing all the parenting. And then I was going away at weekends to do my learning, coming back, doing my coaching hours in between. So it was full on.
It was a full-on life, wasn't it? And do you remember what you felt like at that time?
Okay. So a blend. So excited for one. Now, if I'd have thought too far ahead, I wouldn't have done what I did.
No.
And that's why when I work with people, I talk about what's your next first step?
Yeah.
Because if we look too far ahead, it's too big, and it immobilizes us and we don't do it. So because I'd broken it down and I was only doing, right, this week I'm going here, and I'm just doing that module, and I'm focused on that module, and I'm doing this many conversations in the evening. So I was really excited about it. And the reason I'm pondering here is because the other side of that was my home life was crumbling. Okay. So now I was managing. I felt like I was growing, and I was excited about what was possible.
Yeah, and who you were becoming and what you're going to be doing. And
what I was learning as well. And anybody that's ever trained to do any coaching, they will know you don't practice at home.
It's probably not a good idea.
It's like, oh, you're doing that coaching again. But you can't help it because it starts to become who you are. You become fascinated by people. And obviously doing these 2 courses, I needed to do more. So I did NLP as well. So I've now got these 3 programs on the go at the same time. So I felt excited. Yeah. But I had a lot that I was managing alongside that. And in hindsight, because we can always look back and see things more clearly. Tells
us something, usually kicks us in the teeth, but we can learn from it.
So I could see what the challenges were.
Okay.
And it got to where I had one more module left. You had all you're assessed. You have to do coaching sessions with somebody who's going to assess you. So I knew I was really close to now getting my pass. Yeah. And I just knew I needed to leave the company I was in. They were great, but it was like, if I don't go, I won't go. And it felt now had this internal conflict of, I want this new world versus, I bring in an income and I have all this responsibility. It's that push-pull. But I had evidence that, when I set my mind to something, I make it happen. Yeah. And I'd already built a successful career as a single mum on my own before. Yeah. So I knew recruitment and I could go back, and I've done contract work. So it felt like a step change. Yeah. And I knew I was on a 3-month notice. So I thought, I'm going to resign. And I'd said to my husband, don't worry, I don't know how I'll do it, but I will earn at least the same. And I didn't know how I would do it.
That was your first challenge and your first target, though, that you set yourself, was to earn the same.
Yeah, I would at least do that, and however that happens.
Yeah.
And so I resigned, and I was very supported. I had 2 amazing leaders where I worked, both females, both amazing. And they encouraged me.
Did they know you were doing all of this in the background?
And they said, it's your calling. And my director, she gave me, I have a little, it's almost like a shrine on my desk at home. And it's got the female, feminine statue. It's got crystals and all sorts of stuff. But it's got her card there, which was leap and the net will catch you.
Okay.
And she sent me that when I resigned, and it was just like, wow. And my other director, who I'm still really connected with, just said, yeah, that's what that's what you're meant to be doing.
And do you wish you'd followed that passion earlier?
I often think if I'd have done something different, I'd have been a psychologist. Right. Because that power of the mind, and I think with coaching, what that's given me is you move people through I call it their sludge, a quicker pace. So you are still getting a deep roots, but you're moving them through it quickly. Yeah. And if I realistically, I wouldn't have the life experience that I've had that makes me who I am. Yeah. Because that is why I think that's why I do what I do.
I'm a believer in, and I know it's not necessarily true, but I'm a believer in you can't coach, mentor, support others unless you've been on a journey yourself.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. And I think you attract the people that have got similar wounds.
Yeah.
Because then you've got the empathy. I mean, I'm very empathetic. And I get a sense of, I'm very intuitive, which I didn't know that was what it was when I was younger. But I do get a sense of, I kind of feel that whole thing about people.
So you've got that really interesting background. And maybe there's somebody listening to this podcast that is perhaps where you were in 2004, did you say?
Well, then it would have been, so it was 2009 when I actually then...
But is that, do I go and do this? Because you were like, I want to go and do this, and then life made you pause, and then you did it.
Yes.
Do you wish that in 2004 you'd made the leap then?
I'm just running that program of what would that have looked like. I want to say yes, but I wonder what would have changed because of what happened afterwards.
Yeah.
I think that journey would have been different. It's almost like getting to where I got to at that point, the timing was right. And also I'd met Joe. Yeah. So I had a walking, living, breathing example in front of me of going, hello, this could be your life. Yeah. I'm like, you're living my life. So that I think I probably wouldn't have seen it. I got so much clarity from being around somebody who was really living in that world. It made it real. Yeah. And so I think in a way it was probably better that I had waited. And also Eden was, he was just starting at junior school when I then eventually left.
So someone listening, you would say just follow your gut, but do the right thing in the moment rather than just jump.
Yeah. I think sometimes though, it depends on the person, because I think we can disable ourselves by going fear. Yeah. I'm too scared. Now's not the right time. We look at all the excuses and we have plenty. Yeah. Instead of going, actually, and that's why, what's that first thing you can do? Just trust that first thing. Do that. And then you'll do the next. So then, when I was ready to leap, I was ready. Yeah. Because I did the small steps. And it was incremental. And I guess one of the things I really advocate with groups, with individuals, is stop and look back, see how far you've come. Because then you go, oh my gosh, I started over there and look where I'm at now. Yeah.
But step by step by step by step. Okay, it's good advice. It's good thinking. And what were some of the personal challenges in how you changed as an individual when you were going through? Because we all do. If you've done coaching courses and you've gone through that kind of self-awareness thing, and you've learned a bit about NLP, you do self-analyze quite a lot, don't you? So how did you change as a personality or as an individual in that period of time, Louise?
So, right. So I was very resilient anyway. I'd had quite a traumatic childhood. I'd had a lot of kind of change in my life. So I'd already got used to things coming, let's call them curveballs. Yeah. And so I think that really helped with me, with my mindset of when things come, there's always a way, and I always will look for the good. What's the reason this happened? What did I gain from it? Because that helps put me back in a position of power. And I did that naturally, which I didn't know I mean, now it is something that I recognise as a tool, which is resilience. But the curveball that I didn't expect through all of this journey was at that time, as I was changing, my marriage just broke, is the way I would describe it. I mean, actually it was crumbling, but it just literally was the last bit. And it was horrendous.
Do you think it was changing because he can accept who you're becoming?
Yes. So I became, and it was, I know a lot now that I've got that insight, and it's his story is his story. But yes, I knew, I mean, I was always a strong woman, always. And, I'd done all this before. I'd already been here. I didn't expect at 45 to be, having set my own business up, having a 5-year-old, and now thinking, I've got to leave. I had to leave. Yes, I think that my drive and I wanted, this, I knew I was going to make this work. I didn't know how, I just knew that. I think that is a mirror sometimes for people, and somebody either is on that journey with you or they're not. And he had his own demons, but they became mine. And it was toxic. Right. And I now understand about gaslighting and narcissism and all of that. But, it was, you couldn't have scripted what happened, actually.
Right. Okay.
So now I've run away, effectively. I had to leave. So I moved in with my mum and left Ellis, my eldest, at home. And I took Eden and, lived in a bedroom for 6 months, whilst on the surface,
everything being rosy,
it all, yes, I got a contract role for 3 days a week with Merlin, and it was a global resourcing manager's role, so it was a big role. And then I was building my business at the same time, whilst living in a bedroom, whilst going through this horrendous divorce that was just horrendous, and all this information I was finding out was just, it was.
Don't need to go there.
It was not good. But on the surface, people would have thought, oh, yes, she's
got it together.
Oh, yeah, totally. Until at home, and my mum used to say, I used to hear you crying every night. You hear crying yourself to sleep. I mean, it was literally where you think, I don't know how I'm going to come out of this. But every day, I mean, my mum still says, I don't know how you got up and did what you did. But, that's what I did. And I used a lot of the tools that I was learning. So the journaling. The one thing that nobody can ever take from you is your imagination, your dreams. And so, I really believe that, we can't change what's happened to us, but we can use our mind to change how we think about it.
So you're a big believer in visionary and
Massive.
Manifesting,
future scripting, write it as though it's going to happen. I mean, at that time, I genuinely thought, I don't know, I'm going to be living in a shed somewhere. And I just remember thinking, no, I'm not. And I used to visualize this house, and I wrote about it. And I used to say, I love my home. And I wrote about the rooms it had. It had to have a south-facing garden because I love the sun, and it had to have a playroom because I hate mess of toys. And it had to be big enough to have Ellis still while he'd at home. And I just literally visualized this house. And it was, and in the end, I just thought, I'm just going to start looking at houses in that budget. I can't afford it, but I don't know, let's just do it. And I used to write every night about this house and thank the universe and say, thank you, it is done. And I live in that house. I actually live in the house that I have it written down. It is that house.
Take your words and you could look at the house.
And I go, it's here. I mean, I had to do a lot of work on it. But it was my home. And I manifested that.
Okay. And are you a believer in that manifesting happens because you focus on what you want to achieve? Or are you somebody that believes that manifesting happens because of spirituality and all of those kind of things?
Both.
Okay.
So we are a big ball of energy as human beings. So our thoughts and our energy is a vibration. Like this is vibrating energy. So what we think has a frequency to it. And I know I would liken it to a radio station. So if I'm thinking positively, let's say that's Radio 1.
Yeah.
And if I'm thinking about how awful everything is and how, if I listen to the news, which I don't, how you could just go down gloom tunnel. Let's say that's, let's say it's Virgin Radio, for example. If I'm frequency and I'm trying to tune into the good stuff, but I've got Virgin, I'm never going to hear Radio 1. I'm never going to hear Virgin. Whereas if I change my thoughts and my frequency goes up, then I'm going to tune into that. So that's the first part. The second part, so it isn't about I'm just going to dream it and that happens.
And it happens, yeah.
You've got to put, think about, okay, where am I putting my energy? But it's how something feels, because that's the vibration, that's the bit. So how do you feel? The excitement, what would it be like to have that? And start seeing it. So you want to use all your senses, feel it, and then just trust. So I think it's a combination, and put some action in. I didn't sit down and go, I'm going to manifest this and do nothing. Yeah. I put, and I do believe that if you put energy in, you get energy out. It might come from a different source. You might be focused over there, but actually something comes in from over there. Yeah. But because you're operating at that, how do I make this happen?
Then things happen.
Things happen. And it's where people go, oh, do you know, that's a real coincidence. No, it's not.
And if somebody's listening to this, because, journaling is one of those hints and tips where most people would say, if you want to change your life and you want to realize where you are and where you want to be, and you want to appreciate the things and feel gratitude, then journal. But there's a lot of people out there that know they'd like to journal, but can't make the first step or don't make the first step. Yeah. So any thoughts on somebody listening to this that's always thought I should be journaling and it isn't? What should they do? Yes.
Well, the first thing I'd be asking them is, well, what's stopping you? Because there'll be a block there somewhere. Start small. When I was in that bedroom and just had no idea where life was going, really. I remember was Joe actually, it said to me, every day capture 3 things that you're grateful for. Now, I had to dig deep, a tree, I remember once was one of them. The fact that somebody let me turn left and let me out of the road. Yeah. But you know what? When you start, again, back to that frequency, when you start to look for the good, you start to find more things that are good. So journaling doesn't have to be war and peace. You might just start by saying 3 things that you're really grateful for today.
Yeah, and just do that every day.
And just do that every day. Journaling's good for, people do it at different times. I personally prefer to journal in the evening.
Actually. Are you a believer in this 5 a.m. club, or you believe in just finding your own rhythm?
Find your own rhythm. What works for me is in the evening, because there is something about emptying your mind. Yeah. So if you're writing stuff as well that you just want to get out, because I say journaling should be free flowing. Write what comes up. There's no right or wrong. Yeah. But then finish with the gratitude. Okay. And finish with those 3 things, because then when you go to sleep, your unconscious mind you've got rid of all your bleh. Yeah. And then you finish with 3 things that you're grateful for. And then then if you go and you're in that point of sleep, it can be really nice just to do a bit of your dreaming, just as you're starting to go into that next state, about maybe what you want the day to be like, or one of those dreams that you've got for yourself. Yeah. Because that's a really positive way to go to sleep, rather than tech.
Sort of angst or tech, and all of those kind of things. A very quick break from this week's episode, which I hope you're enjoying. If you are enjoying, please remember, do help us and help yourself to make sure you don't miss an episode by subscribing and reviewing the episode. So that's it. Short interlude from me. Let's get back to the conversation. So coming back to your story, you're obviously in that hiatus, living with your mum, trying to start the business. Yes. Trying to show the outside world this confident, assured lady. Yes. Inwardly just in turmoil.
Yeah, broken was what I used to look at it as, but yes.
But can you think about when the actual turning point was? Yes. Where you can see the dial changing? So
I was, at the time, when I was living at Mum's, I got a call, and one of my friends was part of the Aspire Women network group locally, and she said, we need a speaker. Would you come and do a talk on confidence and resilience? Well, I can still see myself stood in my mum's kitchen and I'm going, Carla, I can't do that. Therefore, I must, because that's my belief. If I think I'm avoiding something, I need to dive in. I need to lean in. So that was the turning point. And by the way, at that point, public speaking was my terror. It was my fear because of a childhood experience. So I went along and I delivered this event to this room full of women, and I included some NLP stuff. And there was a couple of ladies there that had said, actually, I think you should come along and talk to our boss. I think he'd like some of the work that you're doing. So I went along, and that was my first client, where I did a bit of team working, and I did a couple of sessions, and then I did some coaching and build on some development work for them.
Yeah.
So that was that was my bit of, still did my 3 days at Merlin, but this was now my next part of going out.
You were earning from this new life that you wanted to create.
And then I got coaching clients. And then eventually after I bought my house now, the divorce had gone through, and I was in my new home, and the contract came to an end. And my mum just looked at me and said, well, it's time then, isn't it? I was like, okay. So that's where I was just like all in.
Right.
And I just thought, well, I don't know where the next bit's coming from, but it will.
Yeah.
And it did. And I've all of my business that I've got, all my clients, I've self-generated, all of them. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm always about, who do I know? Who can I have a chat with? You know, who can I share what I'm doing? And ask for help.
Yeah.
You know,
it's a big thing, isn't it?
It's a big thing. And if people ask me for help, I will help them, because I always remember people helping me. And I think it's pay forward.
I often say there's this great analogy, isn't it? That this kind of standing on the shoulders of giants analogy, whereas you should always have that kind of, you should always be looking up for who can help you.
Yeah.
But all at the same time looking down as to who you can help on their journey.
Yes.
And that's it's a kind of way I try and live my life, is actually don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask for support.
Yeah.
But look around, and who else can you help and support?
Yes. And it's just, and I'm really a big advocate of that, you know, and particularly if people are let's call them the underdog. I'm a real, you know, I'm here to support. I want to help people to be their best self, you know, and I think that question you asked me earlier about, you know, if I'd have done it at a different time, I don't think it would be, you know, I think I was meant to be where I was at in order to get to where I got to at that time. Yeah. You know, that synchronicity, it had to get as bad as it got. Yeah. In order to come through. And I do want to share something about the name.
Okay.
So the Beyond Belief name. So my ex-husband was a creative. He was a very talented creative. And he did this, he came out and said, what do you think of this logo? And I'm like, I love it. You know, it was the bird cage, it was the bird free. And by the way, freedom's one of my values. You know, and I just loved it. Well, you can imagine I've gone through hell. And I'm thinking, Beyond Belief, yes, it is. It's beyond. I'm never using that company name. Never. I can't believe my life's turned out like this. And just the irony, because actually I love that name. And as I was developing and growing, it's like, this is such the perfect name. And I believe, you know, if you go beyond what you believe, what's beyond that is beyond belief. Brilliant. And it just resonates. So the irony that it was like, no to, oh my God, yes,
this is it.
Yes.
Brilliant. And talking about some of the stuff that you do and the work you do with your clients, you know, let's start to think about some of the leadership challenges that we see. So in your work in supporting leaders and developing them as better leaders and developing their leadership skills, what are some of the challenges that you see right now?
Right now?
Great
question. I think it's because we're moving into this like different era. And I think we're becoming much more heart-centered. And I think the challenge is where leadership has been probably more tell. I think now
very alpha male, alpha female, isn't it?
Yes.
Do it my way or no way.
Yes. I mean, I came through the 90s. Don't even go there. I think there's definitely, so let's say the language has changed, but I think now it's the actual action and activity is following.
Okay.
So I think we're verbalizing what we want. So that alpha male, that drive, tell, whilst there's an appetite for change, I think there's a fear actually behind it. around, well, if we do that, what does that mean? Or are we going soft? And I think, but equally, I think the heart-centered approach
leadership approach
is being pulled.
Yeah.
We're being pulled into this era of being more heart-centered.
And is that because generations are changing? Is this generation kind of X, millennials, Generation Y, we're all changing? Or do you not believe in that? And do you think it's just the drumbeat of the world?
So I think it's a combination. And I might be going a bit woo, but...
Okay, let's go woo.
Let's do a bit of woo. So we are entering into the age of Aquarius, which is much more heart-centered. So we've been in like the Stone Ages. So I think it's about the next 3,000 years we're going to be in this era, which is why we're hearing a lot more that I don't know if you notice it, but there's a lot more openness to whether it's the woo stuff or the heart-centered or the talking about feelings. And so I think it's a combination. I think it's the generation have different expectations. But I also think people are more in tune with how they're feeling. They want different. We don't want the same. And if you look at what's going on in the world, again, all the fighting, there's a lot.
Yeah.
But most of us want harmony. We want love and peace.
Yeah. But it's really interesting, isn't it? Sorry, I'm going to go a little bit off piece there. Because I agree with you. I think this, in the community that we run, the peer groups, the sessions we do with companies around leadership training, as you do, heartfelt leadership is definitely in play. Yeah.
Yeah.
And in some ways, and the same with you, that's why people engage with us, is to try and get that built within and part of their culture, and they want to transition away. But we have a world which is led by alpha characters at the moment. Isn't that in conflict with what the world wants?
Yes, it is. And I think that's where we as a collective, if the energy goes up, then, if you think of a room of people that are all operating at the same level, that raises that vibration. So it will be interesting to see over the next couple of years what does change at the top.
Yeah. Watch this space.
Yeah. And I work with leaders because I think if you work with the leaders at the top, and they're going to have that ripple effect down. And so if I'm working with an individual as well as the teams, but I always say to people, I want you to be you, because if that person is their best self and they're operating as their authentic self, and they're playing to their strengths, and they're connected to their heart. So, I do a lot around personality styles, but everyone has a heart. Everyone has feelings. Just how we show it might be different. Yeah. So if people are really playing to what lights them up, what puts them in flow, they're going to be happier and healthier. Yeah. So if we can bring those together and create and let people shine, companies will be more successful naturally, because the people will want to go to work and they'll enjoy it, and they'll have less attrition. And I know it all sounds very ideal and a bit pink and fluffy, yet I know that how I get people to do that is with practical things. And it is about psychological safety. It is about tuning into emotional intelligence. It is about creating trust. That's massive.
Yeah. We all want to work somewhere where we believe in the values. The values are similar to our own personal values.
Yes.
And then we want to trust in our managers and leaders, don't we?
Yes.
Because without that, there is nothing.
No, even the bad news.
Yeah.
I'll encourage people to share bad news stories because you'll build trust.
Definitely. So going back, I took you off piste, okay? So one of the challenges is this transition to heartfelt leadership. What else do you see? What are the themes?
The thing you've mentioned, which is about, I call it masculine and feminine.
Right.
So I think that, that whole energy, and I like to talk about masculine and feminine energy rather than just men and women. We know that the masculine is more drive, more, focal vision, point of focus, go, and the feminine is more open, nurturing. We need both. Yeah. Yet a lot of the environments are very geared towards the masculine. Okay. And so I think it's about how are we now as allowing for both, because we need that polarity. We need it in business as well. We want, and that doesn't mean, women, I've got red energy, I've got my masculine energy where I need to go and do something, I'll get it done. And equally, the masculine has that nurturing environment and side as well. But I think the challenge is sometimes, particularly in industries where it's male, where there is, we know it's harder to get, maybe engineering, technicals moved up a bit, but where there are a lot of males in, that is where I see the most challenges.
Right.
That how do you bring the female into that environment and have a supportive environment for her?
Yeah.
Because I've seen them, they come in and then they end up having to turn into more of a masculine energy because they're not supported on the feminine.
Okay.
And we need both.
And that's clearly harder in longer established businesses and typically more corporate businesses, or do you see it playing out in owner-managed SME businesses as well?
Probably more in the corporate world, I think. And there is an awareness, but then I say, well, what's the appetite to change? I've been in rooms where, you've got 19 middle-aged white men and one woman. Yeah. And they're there for diversity and inclusion, because I do a lot around that. And, quite honestly, I'm saying, yes, I can see why I'm here. But it's about, well, how much do you want different? And what are you allowing to still get in the way that's preventing that? And so I think then it's by looking a bit like the small steps. This is now looking for the small wins. Yeah. So what are some of those small things? What is going to be different? What are you going to notice as you're bringing in, more females?
Yeah.
What needs to be shaped and different?
Okay.
So you mentioned value. So I think picking on things that everybody's aligned to the same goal.
Yeah.
That definitely supports that.
And where do you sit with this creating values? In organisations you work with,
yes.
What are your thoughts around how a value set should be documented, set down and rolled out?
Properly.
Yeah.
Or not at all.
We both agree with that. So how do you go about doing it properly?
I think you have to involve everyone. I was listening to something recently, actually, and they were talking about a chain of hotels. And even though they were a chain of hotels, they all got their teams to come up with their own version of what those values meant.
Okay.
So although the overall values were the same,
the words,
the
the themes were the same. Okay.
So where I see values working really well is everybody knows what they stand for.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. But you have to put behaviours to it, because if you've got a value, what would you give me a value that comes to mind? Independence. Okay, so independence to me is going to have a completely different meaning to independence to you. So it's about actually, as an organisation, what would we be noticing in our people that would be showing independence? Yeah. And that will change from role to role as well. Okay. So it's really important that you put the behaviours to it, because that's what people can change behaviours.
Yeah.
And it gives it structure. And then when you're doing, when you're talking about performance, you have to have the values aligned to it.
Definitely.
And remember, we need to see things. So they do need to be around. They have to be lived.
Yeah.
And then...
lived and breathed.
They do. They have
but
to
so
be
often
done
they're
well.
not, are they? That's the bit that frustrates me. You've got all sorts of organisations, in all sorts of sectors that talk about their values, but you and I could probably walk into those organisations very quickly, see in the way in which, we walk into a reception and we're dealt with.
Yes.
That the values are just words on paper.
So where I see it work really well, so I do a lot of work with Booking.com, and they've changed their values 3 times since I've worked with them.
Okay, over what period?
7-8 years.
Okay.
But one of the things that they do is, so even though I've designed, one of the programs that I run with them, I use the language. I use their, I'll use examples of and say, what was that value? How does this relate to that value? Yeah. What do you notice? So it's woven through any development they do, and that's through an external provider. So they are really good at making sure that we are using that we use them in the language as we're delivering, but equally that they're everywhere. Their values they use all the time.
Brilliant. Fantastic. It was one of the big things we did at Inspire. And I talk about a valley of despair and how we came out of that and how we reset the business. And I got my focus, passion, and belief back, was that we had these set of values. We called them our essence, actually.
Nice.
So because actually I had that corporate experience, not enjoyed it. They had the values at the wall that nobody lived and breathed. So came up with we'll describe it as our essence. And yeah, we did live and breathe. We hired by them. We recruited. We assessed people. We worked out which of the clients we wanted to work with, which ones that we didn't want to work with, how we interacted with everyone. It just transformed us because it went through every element of the business.
Yes. And if they're aligned then to the vision, because that's the key, it's like, where are we going? And your values are like your tool that helps you get there. But instead of everybody independently making all these decisions, you're making decisions based on the value set. Yeah. And so
everything's happening in context, isn't it?
Yes. And it reduces the amount of decision making by multiple people because it just brings it and narrows it in. And if you think about, again, going back to that energy, if you're all working towards the same thing, you're going to get there a lot smoother, easier, quicker.
Definitely. And you obviously do some one-to-one coaching.
Yes.
So what are some of the benefits that you see in somebody undertaking one-to-one coaching?
Well, a lot, because you're working, I know that I open up this safe space. I know that. And also I allow for people, I think they have their platform to share. Yeah. The type of coaching I do, yes, I'll do some skills, but that's not where I work. I work with you. I will work at what's your purpose in life? What's your identity about who you are? What are your beliefs? Because that is going to be, your fuel. Yeah. And what are your values? We work with all of that. Skills and behaviours change, but often where we get stuck is in our beliefs. Our belief system runs us. Yeah. And we have outdated beliefs. That have been, like I talked about, not standing up in public. Yeah. That was because of something happened when I was 11. Yeah. And that whole thing about I'm never going to speak up in front of somebody was just now a belief that was keeping me safe. But it wasn't. No. It then becomes something that's outdated and we don't recognise it's running the show. No. So what you get with a coach, I always say, I haven't got your answers, you've got your answers. What I've got questions that I can help you unlock your answers. I describe it as like, we're going to walk down a path together. I'm going to hold the light. Okay. And I'm going to light your path up for you. Yeah. But it's your path. So I'm a true coach because there's a difference between coaching and mentoring. And some people call themselves a coach and then they tell you what they think. Well, that's not coaching.
That's mentoring, isn't it?
Yeah. And there's a place for both. And I will say to somebody, if they're, if I'm asking them some questions and I think I have got something that might help them, but I'll ask permission and I'll wait till it's relevant and I'll say, I've got something I can share, because I do a lot of leadership and I tend to work with, people that are in senior roles.
You've seen things through life experience and people that you've worked with, haven't you?
But I would say the biggest gift of having a coach is they're there to hear you, but equally they will ask you the questions that you don't ask yourself. They will hold the mirror up for the good and the not so good. Yeah. And that it's life. I mean, it is literally life changing. Yeah. I've had a coach. I wouldn't be where I'm at.
Do you still have a coach now?
Yeah.
So it's an important part of your set of skills and ability for you to grow as a human.
Yes. I'm probably now ready more for mentoring for my next level about where I want to go to. But I'm surrounded, because of my world, I have great people around me who will challenge me. And I do challenge, but I do it in a really safe way. And I also, I think one of the things about coaching is help people really understand who they are. Okay. And because often it is the stuff that we don't want to tell people. We've all got a shadow side. Yeah. It's the stuff we don't want to say out loud. And that's the stuff that you put a light on it. Then it doesn't have any hold over you.
Create the safe space first, though.
Oh, totally. I mean, I'm known for, people sharing and they trust me. And I'm, as I said, I will pretty much always get to pain points with people because that's what's holding them back. Definitely. And let's move through that. And I will help people process. We nearly always go back to childhood and we will process some of those experiences and they can see, I think it was Steve Jobs says, you can't join the dots forward, you can only join them backwards. Yeah. And that's so true.
It is.
And before I heard that saying, I call myself a dot joiner, because people say to me, "Oh my, you just helped join the dots."
Yeah.
I never realised that thing that happened at school is why I do that.
Yeah.
But for me, I can see clearly.
We're the sum of our experiences, aren't we, as humans?
Yes, we are. And the thing about the negative behaviours, they're there to keep us safe. And I think that's what we often beat ourselves up for. You know, I had, as I mentioned earlier, I had chronic low self-esteem. You know, that whole surface piece of I must look confident. I wasn't that person at all. I was just, you know, the whole of my career when I was in recruitment, and I was one of the top people within a national company, and I was still thought I was winging it. Yeah. And I ran teams, and it was still like.
But some of us have that ability to put the face paint on, don't we?
But it's hard work.
And paint the picture of being successful and being true, you know, being that person that's got confidence and belief. But the inner person can be something completely different, isn't it? And I think it's only when you get to a point where you can start to join the two up, and again, something you said earlier, become your true self. Yes. That you can really start to succeed and be happy.
I call that this inside out journey. I think everything starts in here. Yeah. You know, it's not out there, because if we look out there to make us happy, we're never going to be happy, because we're relying on others, or we're relying on the fix of something, rather than actually sometimes we just need to come home to self and sit with whatever's going on, even the ugly bits, and kind of go, okay, well, what is this, and know that we're on this journey. And so I don't know where your beliefs are on this, but I really do believe that we are here to learn and grow. And we're given lessons. And if we don't learn the lessons, the same thing keeps happening until we learn it. Yeah. And then it's like, I got it now. Yeah. That I know what I was meant to learn here. And then we feel that whole sense of growth. And we are here to grow. So, you know, I always encourage people. I say when I'm running a session with a group, you know, if you feel uncomfortable, excellent. Because you're going outside your comfort zone.
And you're going to learn something.
I'm not going to put you in panic.
As somebody with that mindset, that positive mindset that we're here to learn and grow, when you look around and you see so many people that don't show that and don't believe in that and spend their time on their phones, or spend their time, you know, in some way self-harming through use of drugs, alcohol, and all of those kind of things. With that inner belief you've got, isn't there this sadness that comes across you? And how do you cope with that?
Well, I always want to try and help. But there are people, and I also think everybody has a positive intention. Every poor behaviour is driven from a positive intention. They want something, whether it's attention, whatever that is. So I think that's the first part, is to come with compassion. Okay. And don't get me wrong, I don't walk around floating about. You know, I am human. I do swear and I get cross. My teen will tell you that. But I will equally think, I wonder what's going on for them. Now, there's some people that they're afraid. You know, if they've lived in a particular way for so long, that's their identity. Yeah. That's who they are. That's who they believe they are. But if you can start to give them a nugget of something that'd be different, but they've got to want different. Okay. So sometimes it's just about planting seeds, and then those seeds will grow. But I actually think we are all on our own individual journey, and some people want to move forward more than others. Some people don't. Some people actually, they want to stay stuck because they will be getting something from it. And those people tend to blame everybody else, and it's always their fault. It's everybody else's fault. And that's where you choose, where are you putting your energy? Yeah. Because I talk about radiators and drains, and I know who I like to be around.
Okay. I like that, radiators and drains. Heard that before, but that's a reminder. I do like that. Yeah, sit next to a radiator, not a drain, definitely. So let's round up the podcast and our conversation with some quickfire questions, if you're ready for that, Louise.
I am. Go on.
So let's start with, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
I think it's more of a saying, actually, I like, which is being yourself, no effort required.
Okay.
And I love that.
Cool. I could go off in a conversation there, but we won't. This is the quickfire round. So, a business book or self-help book that's made a difference to you that you'd recommend to others?
Okay, I'm going to do two.
Okay, I'll allow you that.
I'm going to do the first one when I was very, very early on in my journey, before my self journey. And it was The 10 Secrets in Life That Every Woman Should Know by Barbara DeAngelis.
Okay.
And I loved that book. And she always had a little saying at the beginning of a chapter. And one of them, which I do quote to people when I'm coaching, is a ship feels safe in the harbour. That is not the purpose of a ship. I think that's true. Yeah. So that book, definitely. And most recently, it's the Bob Proctor, Change Your Paradigm, Change Your Life, because I think it's a beautiful reminder about how we are I always say I want to put people back in the driving seat of their own life. Yeah. And I think there's some really lovely reminders in there. All of these things, none of it's new. It's all just remodeled, and different things appeal to different people at different times. So that one I'm enjoying. Yeah. Okay.
If there was a person, current or past, that you could have dinner with, who would that person be?
I think Gandhi.
Okay.
Because I think there's something around the whole essence of that deep connection to people. I think that's what we are craving as human beings, is to have a deeper connection with others.
Brilliant. And after a challenging day, how do you unwind?
It depends what day it is.
Okay.
So I do like a bit of sofa time, but I love gong baths.
Okay.
I love my breathwork classes, and I love a bit of salsa. So sometimes movement is my downtime. Other times it might just be, I might need a bit of Bridget.
Bit of calm.
Yes.
And a bit of TV at other times. So, final question on the podcast, and I am intrigued to hear your answer, is what's your personal definition of success, Louise?
For me, myself, or...
Not for the business, for you.
For me, so where I'm going with the work that I'm doing, my sweet spot, as I'm calling it, is empowering others, and I love that. So I'm doing a lot around menopause at the moment within businesses. It's empowering leaders, but particularly I love working with women because I am one and I kind of get it. And personal success would also be, actually, I'd like to have a partner now in my life, 11 years on. I think it's time.
Time's ready.
Yes.
Brilliant. Fantastic. And if people want to learn more about you and learn more about Beyond Belief, where can they go, Louise?
So go to my website, which is beyond-belief.co.uk. I'm on LinkedIn. That's the only medium I really use as well.
Brilliant.
So, yes.
Brilliant. So thank you for such a deep and meaningful conversation. My brain is just ticking away. It's going to take a while for me to reset today. But thank you for sharing so many insights with our listeners, and thank you for being a great guest on the podcast.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
No, it's been great.
Thank you.
Thank you. What a warm and lovely conversation that was with Louise, and I hope you, like I, have taken away some insights, some thoughts. I did end that conversation with saying that I'd come quite deep in my own mind, and I'm still trying to process some of those things that Louise shared with us. So I hope you've really enjoyed that episode of the Evolve to Succeed podcast. And if so, please do subscribe to the podcast on your favourite channel and go to evolveadvisory.co.uk if you want to find out more about us. Until the next episode, stay safe, enjoy life, and see you soon. Thank you.